You know who I am?
Grandpa?
Oh.
Don't be afraid, grandson. Grandpa's holding on.
You think you can honk at me like some kind of tough guy? In my town?
Back in 2019, in the sticky heat of a Jacksonville, Florida evening, a single dashcam clip turned a routine drive home into a moment that still burns in the memory of every man who ever wore a uniform or raised a grandson. The footage starts innocent enough, an old blue Chevy pickup idling at a red light on North Main Street, the kind of tired intersection where the smell of fried chicken from the corner spot mixes with diesel and distant thunder. Behind the wheel sits 55-year-old Ronnie Mayfield, a broad-shouldered black Army veteran whose graying beard and faded desert camo cap told the story of 2 tours in the Gulf and 20 years hauling freight from coast to coast just to keep his family's lights on. In the back seat, his 12-year-old grandson Deshaun fidgeted in a sweaty basketball jersey, knees bouncing, still buzzing from practice, the boy's big brown eyes reflecting the red glow of the stoplight. Then the patrol SUV appeared. No lights, no siren, just a sudden black and white beast cutting across the intersection and slamming on its brakes right in front of Ronnie's hood. The truck rocked. Ronnie's knuckles went white on the wheel. One polite honk. That was all. A single, civil beep from a man who had spent his life yielding to bigger rigs on the interstate. Can you picture the shock when that honk was answered not with an apology, but with fury? The SUV's door flew open before the echo even died. A burly white officer, badge catching the streetlight like a threat, stormed out, face twisted with something darker than road rage. In 3 strides he was at Ronnie's window, yanking the door so hard the hinges screamed. "You know who I am," he bellowed, the words cracking like a whip. Before Ronnie could answer, the officer's hand clamped onto his collar, dragging the veteran out into the humid night and slamming him chest first onto the warm hood. Ronnie's right arm was wrenched high behind his back, shoulder burning like it had in the desert sand years ago. Metal bit into his cheek. The hood was still ticking from the engine heat, the smell of hot oil and the officer's sore breath filling his nostrils. Inside the truck, little Deshaun pressed both hands against the glass, mouth open in a silent cry. The boy's small voice finally broke through. "Grandpa." But Ronnie, teeth clenched against the pain, whispered back steady and low, the words caught forever on that dash cam, "Don't be afraid, grandson." Grandpa's holding on. How does a man who once stood guard for his country end up face down on his own hood in the city he called home? The officer's knee pressed into the back of Ronnie's leg, voice rising. "You think you can honk at me like some kind of tough guy? In my town?" The accusation hung there, thick as the Florida humidity, while blue lights from a second cruiser painted the scene in cold flashes. Ronnie's cap, the one with the 1st Infantry patch he'd earned in 1991, lay trampled in the gutter, soaked by a puddle that smelled of gasoline and regret. His heart hammered against the metal, each beat a reminder of every time he had told Deshaun, "Keep your hands visible, son. Stay polite. The world ain't always fair." Pedestrians on the sidewalk slowed, phones rising like witnesses. A woman in nurse scrubs whispered, "That's excessive," but the officer didn't flinch. He radioed for backup, the crackle of the speaker mixing with Deshaun's quiet sobs from the back seat. Ronnie's mind raced through the pain. Flashes of sandstorms in Iraq, the long nights on the road singing gospel to stay awake. The pride he felt when he picked Deshaun up after every game. All of it, everything he had built with calloused hands and quiet dignity, now pinned under the weight of one man's temper. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, cold steel-biting skin that had never flinched in combat. As the officer hauled him upright, Ronnie caught one last look at his grandson through the window, those wide, terrified eyes asking a question no child should ever have to ask. The crowd grew. Someone shouted, "He's a veteran!" But the officer only shoved Ronnie toward the patrol car, the dash cam still rolling, capturing every second of the humiliation. What happened in the minutes after that arrest would tear through Ronnie's family like a storm. What secret rage had turned a simple honk into this kind of force? And why, when the full Bodycam footage finally leaked 3 years later, did the city of Jacksonville pay out a settlement in 2022 while the same officer stayed on the street? Badge still shining. The answers were coming, but in that moment, with his face pressed to the hood and his grandson crying behind the glass. Ronnie Mayfield could only hold on, the way he had always done, the way every black veteran who ever came home wondering if the fight was really over knows how to do. Ronnie Mayfield had spent most of his adult life learning how to keep calm when everything around him wanted to explode. In the Gulf, he learned to breathe slow while mortars shook the ground. On the long hauls across I-10 and I-95, he learned to swallow road rage from tailgaters and let the CB radio carry his gospel hymns instead of curses. But that night in 2019 on North Main Street, with his grandson crying in the back seat and his shoulder screaming from the twist, calm felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. They hauled him to the Duval County Jail in the back of the second cruiser. The ride was silent except for the low growl of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Ronnie sat with his head against the cage, wrists raw under the cuffs, replaying every second in his mind. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't cursed, hadn't even looked the officer in the eye too long. Just one honk. One sound that said, "You almost hit us, man." And now he was here, smelling of sweat and fear, while Deshaun was left alone in the truck until Child Protective Services arrived to take the boy to his mother's house across town. At the jail, the booking officer, a younger black man with tired eyes, recognized Ronnie right away. "Coach Mayfield," he asked quietly, glancing at the faded 1st Infantry tattoo on Ronnie's forearm. Ronnie had coached Little League basketball at the Boys and Girls Club for 15 years after he hung up his trucking keys in 2014. Kids called him Coach Ron. Parents trusted him. This deputy had once been one of those kids. Now he processed him like any other arrestee, fingerprints, mugshot, the orange jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and despair. Ronnie's wife, Marlene, got the call at 10:17 p.m. She was folding laundry in their small brick house in the Moncrief neighborhood when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was clipped, official. "Your husband has been arrested for resisting an officer with violence." Marlene dropped the towel she was holding. Her knees buckled. She had been married to Ronnie for 32 years. Through deployments, layoffs, the slow grind of raising 3 kids on one paycheck after another. She knew his temper was short only when someone threatened the people he loved. Otherwise, he was the man who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. By midnight, she was at the jail, pressing her palms against the cold glass partition, tears cutting tracks through her makeup. Ronnie looked smaller in the jumpsuit, shoulders hunched, the pride that usually held his spine straight now crushed under invisible weight. "They took Deshaun," he told her through the phone. "Tell his mama I'm sorry." Marlene nodded, unable to speak. She could see the bruise blooming under his left eye, the way his right hand trembled when he tried to hold the receiver steady. Word spread fast in Moncrief. By morning, neighbors were gathering on porches, phones out, sharing the grainy clip someone had pulled from a bystander's video. The dashcam footage hadn't leaked yet, but the street version was already viral in group chats. They slammed Coach Ron like he was nothing. He's 60-something and still works security at the warehouse to help his daughter with college. That boy Deshaun saw it all. Anger moved like heat lightning across the block. Quiet at first, then building. Ronnie's oldest son, Jamal, a corrections officer at a state prison 2 counties away, drove through the night to get home. When he walked into his parents' house at dawn, he found Marlene sitting at the kitchen table staring at a cold cup of coffee. Jamal didn't speak. He just pulled out his phone and started calling every lawyer contact he had from the union. "This ain't right," he kept saying, voice low and shaking. "Dad don't resist. He don't even argue with cops. Not after what he saw overseas." The officer who made the arrest, Sergeant Travis Boone, was 38, a 10-year veteran of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Neighbors knew him as the guy who liked to roll deep through the hood with his lights off, waiting for any excuse to light somebody up. His bodycam had been malfunctioning that night. At least that's what the initial report said. But the dashcam in Ronnie's old Chevy didn't malfunction. It caught everything: the sudden cut, off, the honk, the charge, the takedown, and those whispered words to Deshaun that would later break hearts across the city. 3 days later, Ronnie posted bail with money scraped from church friends and a second mortgage on the house. He walked out into blinding sunlight, Marlene holding his elbow like he might fall. Deshaun was waiting in the car, eyes red, basketball still on the floorboard where he'd left it. The boy didn't speak at first. He just reached over and squeezed his grandfather's hand so tight Ronnie felt the bones grind. "I wasn't scared." Deshaun lied. Ronnie pulled him close. "I know you weren't, champ. I know." But inside, Ronnie was unraveling. Every night he woke up sweating, dreaming of sand and cuffs and a voice yelling, "You know who I am." He stopped going to the gym. Stopped coaching. The man who used to walk tall through the neighborhood now kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with patrol cars that cruised by slow, like sharks. The city promised an internal investigation. The union promised due process. Ronnie's lawyer, a young public defender named Keisha Rollins, who took the case pro bono because her own father had been a trucker, filed motion after motion, but the Bodycam stayed lost, and Sergeant Boone stayed on active duty, working the same streets. How long can a man carry that kind of weight before something breaks? And what happens when the system that's supposed to protect you decides you're the threat instead? People in Moncrief were already asking those questions in barbershops and church parking lots. Type justice in the comments if you think a veteran who served his country shouldn't have to beg for respect on his own streets. Let me know. Have you ever seen something like this happen in your city? Where are you watching from right now? Because this story, it's far from over. Back in the weeks after that fateful honk on North Main Street, Ronnie Mayfield's world shrank to the size of his living room couch. The man who once commanded a convoy through enemy lines now flinched at the sound of sirens on TV. Marlene watched him withdraw, her heart breaking a little more each day as he stared out the window at the patrol cars that seemed to circle their block more often. "It's like they're daring me," Ronnie muttered one evening, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Daring me to step out of line again." But what line had he crossed in the first place? A honk? In a city where black men like him had been taught from boyhood to swallow their pride just to make it home. The motives behind Sergeant Travis Boone's explosion that night weren't immediately clear, but as Keisha Rollins dug deeper, patterns emerged like cracks in a faulty foundation. Boone had a file thicker than a phone book, complaints from the community dating back to his rookie days in 2009. Excessive force during a welfare check in 2012, where an elderly woman ended up with a broken wrist after resisting. A racial profiling stop in 2015 on a young father walking home from the graveyard shift. Whispers in the precinct called him the bulldog, quick to bite, slow to let go. But why Ronnie? Why that night? Flashbacks haunted Ronnie as he sat through depositions. He remembered his own triggers the day in 1991 when his unit rolled into Kuwait, the acrid smell of burning oil fields choking the air. The constant hum of fear that made every shadow a threat. Coming home in 93, he thought the war was over, but Jacksonville had its own battles. Layoffs hit the trucking company in 2014, right after his second knee surgery from years of climbing in and out of cabs. He took the coaching gig at the Boys and Girls Club to fill the void, mentoring kids like Deshaun, boys who reminded him of his younger self, full of fire, but trapped in a system that doused it with cold water. Deshaun's mother, Ronnie's daughter Tasha, a single mom working double shifts at a call center, saw the change in her son too. The boy stopped dribbling his ball in the driveway, started jumping at loud noises. "He asks me every night if Grandpa's gonna be okay," Tasha told Marlene over coffee one morning, her voice cracking. "And I don't know what to say." The incident had ripped through the family like shrapnel. Jamal, the son, pushed harder at work, channeling his anger into overtime hours, but at home he paced like a caged animal. "This ain't just about Dad," he said. "It's about all of us. Every time we drive, we wonder if today's the day." Boone's side of the story, pieced together from internal reports that Keisha finally pried loose, painted a picture of a man unraveling under pressure. In 2019, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was under fire for a string of botched stops. Protests simmering after a high-profile shooting the year before. Boone had been passed over for promotion twice, his wife filing for divorce amid rumors of his drinking. That night, he was off duty but in uniform, heading home from a bar where he'd nursed a few too many. The honk hit him like a slap. In his mind, it wasn't just a sound, it was disrespect. Insolence from a civilian in a beat-up truck. "You know who I am." Those words weren't just anger, they were a desperate grab for authority in a life slipping away. Ronnie's internal storm mirrored it. He replayed the moment over and over, the SUV cutting him off, the door slamming, the yank that sent pain shooting through his old war injury. I served so folks like him could sleep safe, he confided to his pastor during a late night call. And this is the thanks. The pastor nodded over the phone, but Ronnie's rage built quietly, fueled by the H in his shoulder and the fear in Deshawn's eyes. He started avoiding the mirror, hating the bruises that marked him as a victim. I'm no victim, he'd growl to himself in the dark. I'm a fighter. As Keisha built the case, she uncovered a key trigger Boone's history with veterans. In 2016, he'd been involved in a roadside altercation with a white ex-Marine that ended in a handshake and a warning. No cuffs, no takedown. But with Ronnie. The dashcam showed Boone glancing at the veteran's cap before the slam, almost like it offended him. Was it jealousy? Resentment toward a black man who had earned what Boone chased? The questions piled up, each one a hook pulling Ronnie deeper into the fight. Tasha noticed her father's hands shaking when he tried to tie his shoes. Marlene heard him crying in the shower, the water masking sobs that carried the weight of decades. Deshawn drew pictures at school, stick figures of a big man protecting a small one from a monster in a badge. The therapist the family started seeing called it trauma ripple. But in Moncrief, they just called it life. What if the real trigger wasn't the honk at all? What if it was something deeper, something systemic that turned good men into casualties on both sides? As the investigation heated up, a bombshell dropped. Boone's bodycam wasn't malfunctioning. It had been turned off deliberately. The footage existed, hidden in a locked server. When Keisha demanded it, the department stonewalled. But leaks have a way of finding light, especially in a city tired of shadows. The confrontation was coming. Ronnie felt it in his bones, that old soldier's instinct warning of incoming fire. But this time, the battlefield was a courtroom, and the stakes were his dignity, his family's future. Would the truth set him free, or just expose how broken the system really was? The tension in Jacksonville thickened like fog rolling off the St. Johns River as the incident escalated from a simple traffic stop into a full-blown showdown captured on every angle the lawyers could find. Back in 2019, right after Sergeant Travis Boone slammed Ronnie Mayfield onto the hood of his Chevy, the scene unfolded in chaotic bursts, each second etched into the dashcam footage like a scar. Boone's voice boomed through the speakers, raw and unfiltered. "Stop resisting! You hear me? Stop!" But Ronnie wasn't resisting. His body went limp the moment the cuffs tightened, an old soldier's instinct to escalate, kicking and even as pain shot through his twisted arm. The patrol car's lights pulsed blue and red, turning the intersection into a strobe-lit nightmare. Deshawn's small fists pounded the window from inside the truck, his cries muffled but piercing. "Let him go! That's my grandpa!" Boone glanced back, eyes narrowing, and barked into his radio, "I've got a combative suspect here. Send backup and CPS for the kid." Combative. Ronnie's mind reeled. He hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't even raised his voice. The only combat was in Boone's head, fueled by whatever demons had him cutting off traffic without sirens in the first place. A second officer arrived, a lanky rookie named Officer Alina Vasquez, her body cam rolling crystal clear where Boone's had failed. She stepped out, hand on her belt, assessing the scene with wide eyes. "Sarge, what's the situation?" Boone shoved Ronnie harder against the hood, the metal groaning under the pressure. "This guy's aggressive. Honked at me like he owns the road, then resisted arrest." Vasquez hesitated, her gaze flicking to Deshawn's tear-streaked face. "Sir, the kid's alone in there. We need to secure him." Ronnie lifted his head just enough to lock eyes with Vasquez. "Please, ma'am." He rasped, voice steady despite the gravel in his throat from the takedown. "Hay's my grandson. Just take him home to his mama. Address is in my wallet." The words hung in the humid air, thick with the scent of exhaust and impending rain. Boone snorted. "Shut it, pal. You're in no position to give orders." But Vasquez nodded subtly, moving to the truck. As she opened the door, Deshawn scrambled out, throwing his arms around her leg. "Don't hurt him," the boy whispered. She knelt, her voice soft. "We're not hurting anyone, okay? Let's get you safe." Meanwhile, the crowd swelled, a mix of late night shoppers and residents drawn by the lights. Phones lit up like fireflies, capturing Boone's every move. One man, a burly mechanic from the auto shop across the street, shouted, "Ease up, officer! He's an old vet." Boone wheeled around, face flushing crimson. "Back off, or you're next." The threat crackled with electricity, the kind that could spark a riot in a neighborhood already simmering from years of over-policing. Ronnie felt the shift, the collective breath holding of Moncrief folks who knew one wrong word could turn this into headlines. Vasquez radioed for CPS, her tone urgent but calm. Boone, pacing now, kept his knee on Ronnie's back, the pressure building until Ronnie's vision blurred. "You think you're special with that cap?" Boone muttered close to Ronnie's ear, breath hot and beery. "I know your type. Always playing the victim?" Ronnie's jaw clenched. Victim? He'd pulled buddies from burning Humvees, driven through blizzards to deliver loads on time, coached kids through losses that taught them more than wins. But here, pinned like roadkill, the words stung deeper than the cuffs. Sirens wailed in the distance. More backup. Vasquez secured Deshawn in her cruiser, the boy's sobs echoing as she buckled him in. "Grandpa, I'm sorry I made you late." Deshawn called out. Ronnie twisted his neck, ignoring the fire in his shoulder. "Ain't your fault, champ. Love you." The exchange, caught on Vasquez's bodycam, would later become the emotional gut punch in court. A grandfather's quiet strength amid chaos. Boone finally hauled Ronnie to his feet, marching him to the cruiser. As they passed the truck, Ronnie caught a whiff of Deshawn's gym bag. Sweat and rubber, innocence shattered. The door slammed shut, the cage divider cold against his forehead. Boone slid into the driver's seat, smirking in the rearview. "Should have kept quiet, old man." Ronnie met his gaze in the mirror. "I serve this country. What about you?" Boone's knuckles whitened on the wheel, but he said nothing, peeling out with a screech of tires. The escalation peaked there, in that silent ride to the station, but the fallout was just beginning. Vasquez's report noted unnecessary force, a crack in the department's wall. Bestander videos hit social media by morning, hashtags like Fay Justice for Cochran trending locally. Ronnie's family rallied, but the damage was done. A cracked rib from the slam, confirmed at the ER after booking, and a grandson who now slept with the lights on. How does one man's bad night turn into another's nightmare? And what happens when the cameras keep rolling, exposing truths the powerful prefer hidden? In Jacksonville back then, the answers came slow, but they came with fire. Drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed a stop go wrong like this? What would you do if it was your family? Let me know where you're tuning in from. Maybe we've got similar stories in our towns. The chaos that erupted after Ronnie Mayfield's arrest rippled outward like a stone thrown into the murky waters of the St. Johns River, touching every corner of his life and the lives of those who loved him. Back in 2019, as the cruiser sped away from North Main Street with Ronnie in the back, the intersection didn't just clear out, it transformed into a powder keg of whispers and outrage. Bystanders who had filmed the takedown uploaded clips to social media before the lights even stopped flashing, the video spreading like wildfire through Jacksonville's black communities. By dawn, I Free Coatron was trending on local Facebook groups, with comments pouring in, "That's my uncle's old coach. He don't deserve this. Cops think they own the streets now." Deshawn, bundled into Officer Vasquez's cruiser, clutched his basketball like a lifeline as CPS arrived. The social worker, a stern woman with a clipboard and kind eyes, drove him to Tasha's apartment in the Arlington neighborhood. When the door opened, Tasha collapsed to her knees, pulling her son into a fierce hug. "What happened, baby?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Deshawn buried his face in her shoulder, the sobs coming hard now. "They hurt Grandpa. He told me not to be scared, but I was." That night, Tasha sat up watching him sleep, her phone buzzing with updates from Marlene. The boy's dreams were haunted. He woke screaming about blue lights and yelling voices. School counselors noted the change. The once outgoing kid now sat quiet in class, drawing police cars with X's over them. Ronnie, released on bail after 3 agonizing days, stepped into his home like a ghost. Marlene met him at the door, her arms wrapping around his bruised frame. "It's over," she said, but they both knew it wasn't. His cracked rib throbbed with every breath, a constant reminder that forced him to sleep sitting up. Doctor's orders, no heavy lifting, no coaching. The warehouse security job he held part-time, gone, they let him go quietly, citing liability concerns. Bills piled up on the kitchen table, unopened envelopes staring like accusations. "How are we gonna make rent?" Marlene asked one night, her hands trembling as she sorted pills for his pain. Ronnie stared at the floor. "I'll figure it out, always have." But inside, doubt gnawed at him, the kind that made a proud man feel small. Jamal drove down every weekend, his prison guard uniform swapped for civilian clothes that couldn't hide the fury in his eyes. "This mess is killing Dad," he told Tasha over the phone. As not eating right, not talking. The family gatherings turned tense. Sunday dinners, where laughter used to flow now, echoed with silence, broken only by Deshaun's quiet questions. "When can I see Grandpa coach again?" The ripple hit the boys and girls club too. Kids showed up to practice asking where Coach Ron was, their parents murmuring about pulling out if even good men ain't safe. The club lost donors, whispers of scandal scaring off the checks that kept the lights on. Sergeant Boone faced his own fallout, though it looked different from behind a badge. The internal affairs probe started slow, but Vasquez's report, detailing the disproportionate response, put him on desk duty. His wife finalized the divorce papers that week, citing unpredictable behavior. Buddies at the precinct distanced themselves, the locker room chatter turning cold. Boone drowned it in more drinks, telling anyone who listened, the guy resisted. End of story. But the videos told another, a veteran humbled, a child traumatized, a community ignited. Protests sprouted small at first, a vigil outside the sheriff's office with candles and signs reading, "Honor our vets, not hurt them." Media picked it up, local news crews interviewing neighbors who called Ronnie a pillar. One elderly woman, a retired teacher, said on camera, "Hay fought for us overseas. Now we're fighting for him here?" The pressure mounted on the department, forcing a press conference where the sheriff mumbled about thorough reviews. But for Ronnie, justice felt distant as the pain in his shoulder. What does it say about a system when one honk shatters a family? How many black veterans come home only to face a new enemy in uniform? And if a grandfather can't protect his grandson on a simple drive, who can? These questions hung over Moncrief like storm clouds, demanding answers that wouldn't come easy. The fight was far from over, but the scars, they were already setting in deep. As the dust settled from Ronnie Mayfield's arrest in 2019, the investigation into that explosive night on North Main Street began to peel back layers of deception like an onion under a sharp knife, revealing truths that stung the eyes of everyone involved. Keisha Rowlands, the tenacious public defender, didn't stop at the surface reports. She subpoenaed everything: dispatch logs, Bodycam metadata, even Boone's personnel file. What she uncovered wasn't just a bad stop, it was a pattern of abuse hidden in plain sight, the kind that makes you question if the badge protects or preys. The breakthrough came 6 months in, when a whistleblower from inside the Jacksonville sheriff's office leaked Boone's missing Bodycam footage. It had been deliberately switched off mid-shift, but the rookie Vasquez's cam captured audio bleed, Boone muttering racial slurs under his breath as he approached Ronnie's truck. "These types always think they're entitled," he growled, the words faint but damning over the static. Keisha played it in a closed-door meeting with the DA, her voice steady. "This isn't resistance. This is racism." The room went silent, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and uncomfortable truths. Revelations piled up fast. Boone's history included 5 prior complaints from black drivers in Moncrief, all dismissed as unsubstantiated. One involved a veteran like Ronnie, a 2017 stop where the man ended up with a concussion after tripping during cuffing. Keisha connected the dots. Boone targeted men who reminded him of his own failures, men with service records he envied. A psych evil from his divorce proceedings, unsealed by court order, painted him as paranoid, quick to perceive threats where none existed. He saw Ronnie's honk as a challenge to his authority, Keisha argued in filings. And that cap, it triggered him deep. Ronnie sat through endless interviews, his hands folded on the scarred wooden table at Keisha's office, the room smelling of printer ink and determination. "I just wanted to get my grandson home," he repeated, voice cracking as flashbacks hit the Gulf sands shifting underfoot, now replaced by the hood's heat. Deshaun's therapist reports added fuel. The boy was diagnosed with PTSD symptoms, nightmares of badges and cuffs. Tasha testified to tears streaming, "My son won't play outside anymore. He thinks the cops are monsters." The family's pain became evidence, humanizing the case in ways statistics couldn't. A major twist dropped in early 2020 traffic cam footage from a nearby bank showed Boone's SUV weaving erratically before the cut off. Blood alcohol tests from that night lost in processing. But Keisha's private investigator tracked down bar receipts. Boone had downed 4 whiskeys at a cop hangout 2 hours prior. DUI on duty. The department circled wagons, claiming clerical errors, but the leak went viral, sparking city council hearings where residents packed the room, signs waving, "Badge ain't a license to bully." Vasquez turned key witness, her testimony a bombshell. "I saw no resistance," she said under oath, her uniform crisp but her eyes haunted. Sarge was out of line from the jump. Boone's defense crumbled. He lawyered up, claiming stress from the job, but internal emails revealed higher. Ups knew about his issues and kept him on patrol anyway. Systemic failure. Keisha called it in press briefs, her words echoing through local news. Ronnie's community rallied. Church fundraisers covered legal fees, barbershop talks turned to action, veterans groups picketed the station. Emotions ran high in those revelations. Ronnie felt a spark of hope amid the rage, hugging Deshaun tighter during visits. "We're fighting back, champ," he'd say, though his own therapy sessions uncovered buried trauma from the war, amplified by the arrest. Marlene prayed nightly, her rosary beads worn smooth. Jamal quit his prison job, too angry at the system to stay in it, starting a support group for families hit by bad stops. But the biggest revelation? Boone's cut off wasn't accidental. Dispatch logs showed he was responding to a false tip about a suspicious black truck in the area, phoned in anonymously. Who made the call? Traced to a burner, but patterns suggested precinct insiders covering shifts. Conspiracy? Or just another day in a broken machine? The questions deepened the divide, turning a personal injustice into a citywide reckoning. As the case built toward trial, Ronnie stood taller, the fire in his eyes rekindled. But would these revelations bring real change, or just more shadows? The answers were unfolding, piece by painful piece, in a fight that tested the soul of Jacksonville itself. Share in the comments if you've ever uncovered a hidden truth that changed everything. What would you do if the system turned on you? Drop your city below. Let's see how widespread this really is. By 2022, the revelations from the investigation had built into a tidal wave that crashed over the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, forcing a reckoning that echoed through courtrooms and living rooms alike. The trial for Sergeant Travis Boone started in late 2021, a packed Duval County courthouse where the air hummed with tension, the scent of polished wood and nervous sweat filling the room. Ronnie Mayfield sat in the front row, his family flanking him like sentinels, Marlene gripping his hand, Tasha with Deshaun on her lap, Jamal staring daggers at the defense table. Boone looked smaller in civilian clothes, his smirk gone, replaced by hollow eyes that avoided the gallery. Keisha Rowlands laid it out methodically, the leaked Bodycam audio with its slurs, the traffic cams showing Boone's erratic driving, the psych reports painting a man unfit for the badge. Witnesses took the stand, Vasquez recounting the unnecessary force, the whistleblower exposing the cover-up, even Boone's ex-wife testifying to his rages. He came home that night reeking of booze, she said, voice steady, bragging about putting some thug in his place. The jury, a mix of black and white faces from across the city, leaned forward, the weight of the evidence pressing like gravity. Boone's defense claimed, heat of the moment. A stressed cop making a split-second call. But the dashcam, replayed in slow motion, sealed it, Ronnie's calm honk, the charge, the slam, those whispered words to Deshaun. The boy himself testified, now 13. His voice small but clear, grandpa didn't do nothing wrong. He just wanted to keep me safe. Tears rolled down jurors' cheeks. Ronnie closed his eyes, feeling the knot in his chest loosen for the first time in years. The verdict came swift guilty on charges of assault, official misconduct, and falsifying reports. Boone was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, stripped of his pension, his badge revoked forever. The judge, a stern veteran himself, banged the gavel and looked Boone in the eye. You dishonor the uniform. Men like Mr. Mayfield earned it with blood. Outside, cheers erupted from the crowd. Veterans in caps saluting Ronnie as he emerged, the sun warm on his face like a long-lost friend. The city settled with Ronnie in 2022 for $750,000, enough to pay off the house, fund Deshaun's college, and start a foundation for families hit by police misconduct. The department reformed, mandatory bodycam audits, de-escalation training, a civilian review board with real teeth. But Ronnie knew it wasn't enough. The system chews up good men and spits out excuses. He told a local reporter in 2023, his words sparking debates in barbershops and boardrooms. Boone served his time quietly, released in 2024 to a life of obscurity, while Ronnie coached again, his whistle blows carrying the rhythm of resilience. Long term, the effects lingered like echoes. Deshaun grew into a high school star, channeling his trauma into advocacy, speaking at schools about knowing your rights. Tasha went back to school herself, inspired by her father's fight. Jamal ran for city council in 2024, winning on a platform of reform. Marlene and Ronnie traveled. A road trip down I-95, windows down, gospel on the radio, reclaiming the freedom stolen that night. But scars remained. Ronnie's shoulder ached on rainy days, a reminder of how close injustice cuts. What does true justice look like in a world where one honk can unravel a life? In Jacksonville back then, it looked like a veteran standing tall, a family unbroken, a system cracked but mending. Yet for every Ronnie, how many stories end in silence? The fight goes on, brothers, because dignity ain't given, it's demanded. Type Amen in the comments if this story hit home for you. Have you fought the system and won? Share your victory below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more true tales of grit and justice. Stay strong out there. By 2022, the revelations from the investigation had built into a tidal wave that crashed over the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, forcing a reckoning that echoed through courtrooms and living rooms alike. The trial for Sergeant Travis Boone started in late 2021, a packed Duval County courthouse where the air hummed with tension, the scent of polished wood and nervous sweat filling the room. Ronnie Mayfield sat in the front row, his family flanking him like sentinels. Marlene gripping his hand, Tasha with Deshawn on her lap, Jamal staring daggers at the defense table. Boone looked smaller in civilian clothes, his smirk gone, replaced by hollow eyes that avoided the gallery. Keisha Rollins laid it out methodically. The leaked Bodycam audio with its slurs, the traffic cams showing Boone's erratic driving, the psych reports painting a man unfit for the badge. Witnesses took the stand. Vasquez recounting the unnecessary force, the whistleblower exposing the cover-up, even Boone's ex-wife testifying to his rages. He came home that night reeking of booze, she said, voice steady, bragging about putting some thug in his place. The jury, a mix of black and white faces from across the city, leaned forward, the weight of the evidence pressing like gravity. Boone's defense claimed, heat of the moment, a stressed cop making a split-second call. But the dashcam replayed in slow motion sealed at Ronnie's calm honk, the charge, the slam, those whispered words to Deshawn. The boy himself testified, now 13, his voice small but clear, Grandpa didn't do nothing wrong. He just wanted to keep me safe. Tears rolled down jurors' cheeks. Ronnie closed his eyes, feeling the knot in his chest loosen for the first time in years. The verdict came swift guilty on charges of assault, official misconduct, and falsifying reports. Boone was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, stripped of his pension, his badge revoked forever. The judge, a stern veteran himself, banged the gavel and looked Boone in the eye. You dishonored the uniform. Men like Mr. Mayfield earned it with blood. Outside, cheers erupted from the crowd. Veterans in caps saluting Ronnie as he emerged, the sun warm on his face like a long-lost friend. The city settled with Ronnie in 2022 for $750,000, enough to pay off the house, fund Deshawn's college, and start a foundation for families hit by police misconduct. The department reformed, mandatory bodycam audits, de-escalation training, a civilian review board with real teeth. But Ronnie knew it wasn't enough. The system chews up good men and spits out excuses. He told a local reporter in 2023, his words sparking debates in barbershops and boardrooms. Boone served his time quietly, released in 2024 to a life of obscurity, while Ronnie coached again, his whistle blows carrying the rhythm of resilience. Long term, the effects lingered like echoes. Deshawn grew into a high school star, channeling his trauma into advocacy, speaking at schools about knowing your rights. Tasha went back to school herself, inspired by her father's fight. Jamal ran for city council in 2024, winning on a platform of reform. Marlene and Ronnie traveled, a road trip down I-95, windows down gospel on the radio, reclaiming the freedom stolen that night. But scars remained. Ronnie's shoulder ached on rainy days, a reminder of how close injustice cuts. What does true justice look like in a world where one honk can unravel a life? In Jacksonville back then, it looked like a veteran standing tall, a family unbroken, a system cracked but mending. Yet for every Ronnie, how many stories end in silence? The fight goes on, brothers, because dignity ain't given, it's demanded. Type Amen in the comments if this story hit home for you. Have you fought the system and won? Share your victory below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more true tales of grit and justice. Stay strong out there.